Hello, this is Mike at Gamefromscratch, and welcome to a quick video about Blender 2.77. Now today, as of writing, it is March the 3rd, and Blender 2.77 Release Candidate 2 has just been released. Now Blender tries to follow a 6-week release schedule, and frankly, since we saw Blender 2.76, it's been about 4 or 5 months now, so this is a release long in the coming, and it's not out yet, but it's coming soon. And I thought I would take a look at some of the newest features here, and some of these are really nice. It's not a revolutionary release by any means. We haven't seen there's not B-Mesh or Cycles Renderer, etc. There's not a huge new addition, but some of the additions are definitely nice. And if you come from a world of 2D animation, there's some development here that are going to probably blow your mind. So there's some great stuff in here, and I'm only going to really specifically focus on the game devy stuff because I'm from Gamefromscratch and I'm game focused, and it's the stuff I'm most interested in. However, we'll quickly go through what is in the release notes, and here are the actual release notes. So if you go to the front page, blender.org, there is a link to 2.77 right off of the front page, and you can head in there from now. But this is what is currently the work in progress release notes, and what we've seen in this release are a couple of things. First off, we've got some general cycles improvement, custom baking passes, improved subsurface scattering or SSS, and that's a way of diffusing light for a more accurate renderer. Smoke and fire and point density support on the GPU, so generally GPU rendering of smoke and fire should be improved in speed. Performance improvements for large shader nodes, just general optimization stuff. There's also been some user interface tweaks. Most specifically, you can now drag and drop into the file import window and use up, left, and right arrow keys for going back, forward, etc. And that kind of stuff. Nothing really massively huge. Some changes in the sequencer. I'm not going to get into any of those. Some modeling changes, which I'm going to demonstrate every single one of them except for symmetry aware decimate, and that one's kind of self-explanatory. The decimate operator is now aware of symmetry, so it will decimate left and right pretty much equally, which I guess is nice to see. In sculpting, we've got some general behaviors, so improvements in how paint works, or in the sculpt to snake hook operators. Some animation improvements, game engine improvements, etc. And two biggies down here are probably, first off, OpenVDB support. It's not going to make a huge difference to most of you, but OpenVDB is a large data set tool or library released by DreamWorks for handling very large volumes of data. I think mostly for particle systems, that kind of stuff. But they've integrated OpenVDB support into Blender 2.77, and probably most important, if you're using Blender as a game engine, cube map world textures now work in the Blender renderer for the viewport. Now cube maps is basically you can apply an environment map and have your infinite skybox. So until now in Blender, you've basically had to fake the skybox by creating a large box which was clickable and selectable and seen. You had to scale it. It wasn't infinitely off in the background like a skybox generally is. So now there is integration directly into the Blender default renderer, viewport renderer. So that's kind of cool, especially if you're working in games. And if you're using Blender as a game engine, you basically now have skybox support built in. So that's nice to see. There are some limitations. If you come in here, basically every one of these topics, you can drill down and see a little bit more details. There's also been some OMP, which I forget what it stands for, but it's the Open Multiple Processor. I think basically, but Open MP improvements for multi-threading that seen speed ups across the board in various different things, which is nice to see. OpenVDB we talked about earlier on, and then like you can see the details or the requirements for working with the cube map world textures in the viewport renderer. Now keep in mind, that's not the Cycles renderer, only the Blender renderer, like the old renderer or the classic renderer, whichever one you want to call it. So that's that. Now we're going to jump in and actually show you some of these things in action, specifically the modeling stuff and then the grease pencil changes. The grease pencil changes are huge. Those are probably the major feature of this release, and I'll get into them in a moment. In some ways, I'm a bad person to do that, though, because I don't use the grease pencil. I don't know why. Generally, it's used for doing markups, etc. And if you're not aware of it, if you hold down D in Blender, or if you come in here into the platform, you can come in here and create a new layer and then draw on it over here using the grease pencil options, like draw, erase, etc. But much easier, you can just hold down D and draw basically on a grease pencil layer. That will have automatically created a new layer, like you can see right here. Or you can hold down Shift, oops, yeah, that's not it. Come on, undo. Let's see. It's Control D. Yeah, so Control D, and you can do lines, like so. And if you do D and right, you can erase. And that's basically what the grease pencil has always been. And it's mostly used for doing annotations, drawings, markups, quick previews, etc. Or some plugins have used it in the past. There was a retopology plugin I used to use previously that did grease pencil, took the grease pencil line you drew for figuring out a retopology, and that was the extent of what I really used it for. But now it's much more useful for doing 2D drawing. Now some of this functionality might not be completely new to 2.7.7, but a lot of it is new or improved, so I'm going to be covering it that way. But first, let's go back to the modeling changes, and a couple of them are pretty cool. Now first, let's start with the easiest one, and that is now when you create a new object. So I'm just going to create that cube I just deleted again by going Add, Mesh, Cube, like so. So our cube is back. Now the one major difference you'll see now is when you add a primitive, you can now generate UVs automatically. Little time saver, nice to see. I don't know why this hasn't been in there all along, to be honest, but now this cube automatically got a cube map or the appropriate map for it. So that's a nice new feature, very quick, very easy, but it should make people's lives a little bit simpler. And the next one, and this one I really like, if you take an object and you're in edit mode, like so, and I'm going to unselect everything, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to add another object. So mesh, and I'll add a cylinder, for example, and we'll just rotate that guy X 90, scale it down a little bit, and scale it Y a lot. Okay, so we now have this shape inside of our surface, and I'll actually even go Shift D, rotate Z 90. So we've actually got two of them. Actually, I'm going to undo that because I actually wanted to keep it selected. So we have, sorry about that, we have this selected shape inside of this unselected shape, and that's very important to what this new operator is. And with that done, hit Control F to bring up the Faces menu, and see we now have this Intersect Boolean. And this is awesome. We now have Boolean support right in edit mode. So as you can see right there, it's a Boolean. Previously you used to get this by basically taking two shapes, a modifier operator, and some very awkward ways of going about it. So now it's much easier. It's an editing thing. So using Booleans, doing CSG style modeling is so much easier in Blender now, because right in edit mode you can easily do these Booleans. This is going to be very, very useful for me. Now you'll notice here under Boolean, here's where your various options are. So instead of the difference, which is what you'd normally do if you're going to subtract object A from object B, you can also do intersect or union. Generally it's difference that you're wanting to work with. And remember the selected versus the not selected part? Well, that's very important because that determines what's going to cut from what. So you can you can make it reverse it so that the unselected cuts from the selected, etc. But now we have got the same kind of stuff that we used to previously have to come in here, add modifier, Boolean, and go through like the pick object 1, pick object 2, apply. Now we can do it directly in edit mode. So that is a very cool new feature. So that's it from the modeling side of things. The other thing I mentioned, I'm not going to get into now, is that the decimate modifier, this guy right here, which we use for creating lower polygon versions of, let me actually bring up the, not really that magical when we're dealing with a cube, but basically for reducing polygon counts, well, it will now respect symmetry much better, which again is handy, but pretty self-explanatory. Now the big stuff though is in the grease pencil, especially if you want to do 2D work inside of Blender. You now have a lot more functionality. Let's get rid of that guy. Switch to the front view. So as I said earlier, you can hit D and then left mouse button to draw a shape, like so. All right, so that's your grease pencil in action. Well, now the grease pencil has a lot more functionality. I can do here now, first off, is I can hit Tab, and I am now in edit mode. And this, I believe, is completely new. So now that I'm in edit mode, I can deal with this guy just like I could most basic primitives in Blender. For example, A, select all of the control points that make up that shape, or B, box select, and you see we now have widget operators, so we can use these to go here. I could rotate, I can scale, etc. So there is now a dedicated edit mode for making changes to these guys, which is definitely cool to see. But probably the biggest new addition is Sculpt Brushes. And Sculpt Brushes are down here. So Sculpt Strokes, sorry. And this allows you to quickly make changes to your surface. So we've got, see, smooth, thickness, grab, push, twist, etc. So you can now paint or sculpting. You can take the sculpting approach that you use for modeling and apply it to the grease pencil. So we can make our strokes much nicer, much cleaner. And we've got our controllers down here for strength and radius. But let's go a quick example of how this actually works. So I'm going to select nothing here. We'll zoom in on this guy a little bit. Now you see my line is kind of squiggly and awful. I'm going to go ahead and do a smooth. So smooth is already selected here. So you can just come down here to G pencil and go sculpt strokes. So now I'm in smooth mode. You can see down here the various different options available. And I'm going to just go around my surface. You can see it's just smoothing it out. Like so. And let's smooth that guy out. Or I'll cancel that out. And I'll switch over here now to push. Sculpt strokes. And same results. So very cool addition. It makes making edits or changes to your strokes much easier than it ever was. At the same time, we could have this guy. Oh, I can use the control on the. All right, it should allow me. Anyways, I should have been able to manipulate. That might have been part of the beta problem. Oh, now it does it. Okay. But what you're probably seeing from this is the workflow is really freaking slow. So this whole pick what you want to do, come down here, go into sculpt mode, kind of ugly. Now, fortunately, it's actually a lot better than that. Now you use D and the left mouse button. So for example, I'll go back to smooth mode here, holding down the D key right now. Oops, not D, E, sorry. E down, I'm now in sculpt mode. So D, draw, E, sculpt. And so I could just come over here and switch modes. Come back to E, like so, and I could switch over to smooth now. Hold down E, left click, and apply that sculpt. So this works together very, very, very nicely. On top of that, we can now hit D and E, and we bring up kind of a combination pie menu for drawing and sculpting, or actually just sculpting. There's no drawing brought in there. That's a bit of a missed opportunity. But anyways, D and E brings up the pie menu for choosing pretty much this stuff, or just D and left to draw your shape, and E to sculpt with whatever is currently selected. And again, when we're down here in G pencil, you can also switch your mode down here. So the brush definitely got a lot more treatment on this particular release. At the same time, though, there's awkward color control, so I don't know if you could actually use this as a drawing package yet, because switching colors is such a gigantic pain in the butt. And now we're going to move into an area where I have no idea if this is new or not. Again, I don't use the G pencil that much, but I know that a lot of this is improved. So I'm going to cover it anyways. Now, one thing that was really lacking, and I guess it's still a little buggy at this point, but if I go into the drop sheet and I switch over to a G pencil mode, or grease pencil mode, like so, we can now, here, let me actually, let me just grab everything in here, object mode. I don't really want to delete everything here. I'll grab it this way. All right. So, fresh sheet. I'm on frame 0. So go back to frame 1. That doesn't make sense. I'll do 25 frames. So I could do frame 1 and then go schwa, and then frame 10 and then go schwa, and then frame 20 and then go schwa. Okay, so you're doing like the world's crappiest animation here, basically, but I can now play that, and there's our frames as we're animating through. And this functionality has been there forever. There's nothing really specifically new here. But what we can now do reliably is I can pick a frame right here and copy and paste now work. Apparently, now work is kind of subjective, because who knows if this actually, it actually worked this time. So now we'll see I have my first frame here works, second it works, and then so you can now copy and paste frames much better than you used to be able to. And with the new manipulations and the operations and such we can do, I can easily select this guy and then go into edit mode. Let's just move that guy down a little bit. And we could also do a frame, and then we'll duplicate it. G, move it out a little bit. And let's move it down and over for a little bit more smooth of an animation, and play that. Now, animation's completely crap. But as you can see, the tools there work much better. So if you're looking at doing 2D animations, it's a lot simpler now. The copy and paste is now working. The general technology behind it is working. The tools for editing and doing things and smoothing brushes and all of that stuff is working much better. Now, it might be a lack of my knowledge, but it does seem like you can only have one color per layer. So that's kind of limiting its usefulness, to be honest. So you can fill your shapes, or you can have your stroke color change, but you can't have multiple colors per drawing or per line. So all of the one layer is one color. So if you needed to have 5 colors on one layer, that's 5 different settings, which is kind of a very big limiter, I think, for what you can pull off for this on a, compared to say a Toon Boom kind of thing. But hopefully there is a workaround to that, and it's just my lack of knowledge that is the limiting factor there. But these tools have certainly improved. So if you want to look at using Blender for more 2D stuff, it is there, and the grease pencil has improved greatly in functionality. So it's definitely one of those things that's worth checking out. Another thing we can do fully here is onion skinning. So we can easily see, stop that. See, you can see the previous frame. So green is the previous frame, blue is the next frame. Because my animation is so janky, it looks a little bit, so that's a better example. So green is your previous frame of animation, blue is your next frame of animation. So you can easily see it for doing animation type work. So it's really only the coloring thing that kind of keeps this from being really, really useful. And hopefully there is a workaround to that, and it's just me that doesn't know it. And another thing that I've found somewhat strange is I can't get the thickness brush to work. I don't know if it's just me. Oh, actually, you know what? Now it's working, you bugger. All right, this was never working for me before. So, please ignore, because apparently it works now. All right, that's nice to see. Again, that might be release candidate stuff in action, so I will take that away. So really the only thing missing from this, in my opinion, to be able to make this really genuinely useful is the ability to work with multiple colors instead of having to create a whole whack of different layers to make things work. But definitely the grease pencil is the star of the show with the 2.77 changes, and I hope you've seen some stuff in this video that make it look interesting to you. If the 2.77 release has some stuff added, and I don't think it will, when you're at release candidate, you're pretty much at the end of the, you're feature locked at that point, so don't expect anything major or new, but it is. I will come in here and add some comments down below. So that's Blender 2.77. Hopefully we'll see a full release of that in the next couple of days to weeks. See y'all later.